Hi everyone! Today in Chapter 5 we're taking a look at the other half of the software duo, system software. Now system software kind of gets divided up into its own two categories, the operating system and utility programs. Okay? The operating system is the big kahuna. It's the one that's providing your user interface. So it's the thing that you really see in action. The utility programs are sort of running in the background or running when you need them to run to do whatever task it is that those utility programs do. Now, a lot of times today, the utility programs, or most of them, get bundled in with your operating system. So we don't tend to think of them as being as separate as we used to. But you still can purchase some of them separately if you think there are better versions than the ones that came bundled with your operating system. And sometimes there are. But usually the ones that do come bundled with your operating system are perfectly adequate. Okay? So let's talk about the operating system itself. In addition to actually making it possible to run all the programs that you want to run, all the application software from previous chapter, and providing you with the means to see what you're doing with those. Well, the operating system has your basic user interface. Now, user interfaces have come a long way. On the first computers that I had, the user interface looked something like this. Actually, it didn't even look that good because where you see C:\users \Sarah Jones, it actually just had C:\. And it was up to you to know how to put in the text that would run any programs that you had on your computer. This is called a command line interface. Now, it seems pretty awful, but to be fair, we didn't have a whole lot of application software back there. You know, we just had a few programs that we were able to run, maybe a basic uh, word processor and a basic spreadsheet program like old VisiCalc. So you really didn't need a whole lot of user interface. Although doing things like copying files from one disk to another and all that, you had to memorize how to do that. So you had to be able to type in copy disk A:\B:, and specific file names that you wanted to copy if you didn't want to copy the whole thing. Yeah, it was you had to know some stuff instead of just being able to click on buttons like we have for our wonderful current graphic user interfaces. Now, graphical user interfaces have been around for quite some time now, so the likelihood is small that any of you have ever seen anything else. It's only old farts like me that remember the command line interfaces. But let's look at some of the operating systems that we have currently. Of course, the big one is Windows. Windows is by far the most popular operating system that's out there. Why? Well, because Windows can run on just about anything except Apple computers. So any brand of PC will run Windows. I mean, there's actually a version of Windows that you can run on an Apple computer, um, or you can run Boot Camp and run a Windows simulator. But yeah, and Windows is more popular for business applications, um, which just makes it the biggie. Um, and there's also the fact that all those PCs that run Windows generally are cheaper than the Macs that don't run Windows. So it's got a lot going for it. It's got a lot more software that you can run on it, and it's just cheaper all around. So Windows is the biggie. And that's not to detract from the Macintosh operating system, which runs all the Apple machines. Um, while those machines are generally pricier, they tend to be a little bit more secure and, on the whole, a tad more reliable. Although far more difficult to get repaired. Um, because you just have limited options. I believe Monterey is the most current version of the Mac operating system. But again, it only runs on Apple machines. Now, the Mac operating system, actually, Apple was the pioneer of the graphical user interface. They actually stole it from a different manufacturer, um, but that was partly that manufacturer's or software producer's fault because they failed to protect their rights to that idea properly. So they kind of got what was coming to them. But the whole idea was Unix based, and Unix is an interesting story. Unix was an operating system that was designed for much larger computers, not standalone desktop computers. It was designed for big mainframe and server type computers. Um, but they did a very, very smart thing, Unix did. They gave away their operating system to a lot of colleges and universities that were beginning to have computer labs on campus. And so you had a whole generation of computer science students that came out of college having used mostly Unix-based systems and thinking that that was the be-all and end-all of system software. Don't get me wrong, it was great system software, still is. But it wasn't necessarily appropriate for smaller computers. But all of these computer science students went out to work for people that had bigger mainframe computers, and they're all touting the glories of Unix. So Unix did a lot of business from that. Very smart of them, really. And as a matter of fact, Apple sort of copied that later on by giving away Apple IIe computers to thousands of elementary schools all over the United States. So you had children that knew nothing but Apple IIes and went home saying, "Mommy, Daddy, we've got to have an Apple computer." You know, smart marketing, you can't deny it. It really was. Um, the nice thing about Macintosh computers and the operating system thereof is that it's a great multitasker. It does that a little bit better than Windows computers, I have to admit. But being a business-oriented person, I'm a Windows person, so everybody's got to choose the thing that works best for them. Plus, I like the idea of building my own computer, which you can't do with a Mac. Um, of course, that means you're talking about a desktop, which is what I've got sitting here next to me, which actually my son built for me. Anyway, so Mac operating system, that's, the second biggest. There is another one that you should know about, and that is Linux. Linux is also another really interesting story. A student named Linus Torvalds was one of those, computer science students that was educated on Unix-based systems. He, as were many of those students, was enamored of the Linux system, but recognizing the limitations of it being a system designed for much larger computers, thought, well, let me see what I can do to design an operating system that's more appropriate for standalone personal type computers. So he did, and he called it Linux. Combination of Unix and his name, Linus. And he did a very interesting thing with it. You'd think, hey, I've got this great thing. I'm going to bundle it up and sell it and make millions of dollars. But he didn't do that. He put it out on the web and gave it away, including the source software. He just sent it out there for anybody to use. And he said, look at this thing that I've created. I think it's really good, but what would you do with it? How would you tweak it, make it better? Do it, send it on, share it with other people. And people did, which is why Linux is free. Now, you can pay for Linux, but what you're paying for is for somebody to bundle it up and put it into an easily installed version that people who are not programmers can install on their PCs and run. And a lot of people did. So you're paying a nominal amount for that software, but not for a license for the software for somebody to do the bundling. Okay? Linux is still open source. You can still get a copy of it and tweak it if you are so inclined and are so able. It's popular on servers. It's also popular for people publishing things on the internet. It's very nice for that. Um, a lot of companies like Linux because it's free. Um, for a while there, it was awkward because you couldn't get software easily that ran on it. But since then, a lot of people have published open source versions of other popular softwares like, the Office suite and uh, that run on Linux. So, if you're so inclined, it's out there and it's available. Okay? Now, there's a couple of other operating systems that we should look at, those that are geared up towards more mobile devices. And I'm not talking laptops, I'm talking smartphones and tablets. The two big ones here are Android, of course, and iOS. Android, of course, runs on all smartphones and tablets that aren't Apple. Okay? iOS runs on iPhones and iPads. Now, I will say that Android phones and devices are more popular, have more sales than the Apple devices. Okay? In numbers, not necessarily in dollar volume. And the dollar volume of apps running on iOS systems, well, that's about 67% of the market share. Um, it is what it is. But, these are also important operating systems that you need to know about. So, now let's talk about utilities. There are two that you should really know about. Backup. No, that's not to say that there aren't lots of utility programs. The two that I want to talk about are just the most important. This is something that we tend to forget about, and that is backing up our files. Think about what you've got in those files. You've got all your work for school. You've got all your pictures, all your videos, all your, maybe important home documents. Because let's face it, a lot of that happens via the internet now. Um, well, I mean, I moved and bought a new house 3.5 years ago, and just about all of our transactions happened via the internet. It was not until we got to the very end when we're signing all of the escrow documents that we actually had to go in and sign physical documents. And even then, I got an electronic version of all those files. So I could ostensibly toss all of those physical documents or my copies of them. Now, I'm not going to, they're in my safe, but I could because I've got electronic versions of them, as long as I back them up. Now, we talked about cloud computing in the previous chapter. For backups, a cloud account is a really good option. So whether you have a cloud account through Microsoft or through Apple or through another type of server, a cloud account with enough storage is a great place to do a backup. And I strongly suggest doing a full backup at least once a month. This doesn't have to be a chore. You can set it to happen automatically, like in the middle of the night if you want to. Okay? So it doesn't have to be something that you have to sit there and babysit, but it's important. Now you can do a physical backup. You can do a physical backup onto an external hard drive. Now, if your hard drive looks like that, don't do that because that's broken. A hard drive needs, of course, to be completely sealed up or else it crashes and is useless. If you have an external solid state drive, that would be terrific because those don't take up quite as much room and you can write files to and get files from them a lot faster than you can an old style hard disk like that. But backup is very, very important. You don't want to take the chance of losing all those files with all your hard work and all your memories in them. Okay? The other utility that I think is very important, antivirus. Now, as I said, a lot of software comes bundled with your operating system now. Microsoft has an antivirus program. Let's see what else I've got here. Oh yeah, there we go. All of these are ones that you can get separately. Most of them are pretty good. The thing about antivirus software is it's important that you use it, and it's important that you update it. Okay? Because otherwise it's not a whole lot of good, because new viruses are being created on a daily basis, and it's important that your antivirus software be able to recognize the signatures of those new viruses, and that's what updating does. It informs your antivirus software about all the known new viruses so that it can defend your system against them. Okay? And again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a decent antivirus software, whether it's one that came with your operating system or whether there's also usually your internet service provider, if you use such a thing, um, can provide you with one. Some of them come free, some of them you pay a little extra for. It's just important that you have one, that you update it, and that you run a scan on a regular basis to make sure that you're protected. And again, updating and running that antivirus are things that you can set your operating system to do automatically, at a time when you're not doing anything that requires, you know, intensive access to your system's resources, like the middle of the night. Um, there are a few other utility programs that's important to know about. Many of those are covered in the chapter. I might just mention disk cleanup to get rid of little bits and pieces of old downloads from the internet, bits and pieces of files from programs that you are no longer using and have deleted but somehow got left behind as remnants. The other one is disk defragmenter. As we use our programs and our files, the files tend to get split up into little bits and spread all over our hard disk. And every once in a while, it's nice to sort of reshuffle everything, put all the empty space in one area, and get all the little bits and pieces together so that our operating system can retrieve those files as quickly as possible. And again, the chapter in the book talks about these in a little bit more detail, but those are the other two that I would mention as being relatively important. So that's it for this chapter. I will see you in the next one. Good Margaret, agus